Sometimes the border between life and death is not a wall. It is a thin curtain, barely woven, that moves with the breath of a ventilator. Sometimes that border is guarded, but not always by the living. This is not my story. It is my sister's. And it is the story of a man who loved his profession so much he refused to leave it, even after his final hour. This is the story of the Blue Doctor. Our life was the earth, the smell of damp soil after the rain, the sound of chickens in the yard, nights full of stars so bright you could almost touch them. A calm world, where everything had its place. Then my sister fell ill, an illness that didn't come from the hard work in the fields. A deep pain inside that wouldn't go away. The village elders tried everything, plants, prayers, ancient remedies. Nothing worked. Her body, once so strong, grew weak. So we had to speak of the hospital, a word that frightened us, a word that said our world was no longer enough. The journey to the city was a shock, leaving our little house for that noisy paved road, trading silence for the racket of cars. In the old crowded taxi, I held my sister close. Her head was heavy on my shoulder. She was breathing poorly. Through the window, I watched increasingly tall buildings, strange lights, hurried people who didn't look at each other pass by. I was scared. I was the little sister. I knew nothing of the city. How would I talk to the doctors? How would I understand their rules? I felt like a small boat on an ocean, with only my sick sister as a lifebuoy. The hospital, when we found it, was a mountain of concrete, a fortress with thousands of windows that looked like lifeless eyes. In front of the door, it was constant motion. Stretchers being pushed quickly, families sitting on benches, their faces empty with fatigue, nurses walking rapidly without looking around. The air smelled of strong disinfectant, sad food, sweat, worry. It was the smell of collective fear. The machine swallowed us. We were given a number. We had to fill out papers with complicated questions. We were sent from one department to another. We were like two leaves swept away by a river too strong. They put my sister in a large ward. There were maybe 30 beds, separated by simple curtains that hid nothing. The noises never stopped. People moaning, calling for nurses, coughing, children crying, the rolling of carts. The ceiling light stayed on day and night. You couldn't tell if it was morning or evening. I found a plastic chair and put it near her bed. My job had changed. I had to survive in this new place. I learned to stop a nurse to ask for water. I learned to guess when food would arrive. I learned where the least dirty toilets were. I slept in short bursts, my ear always alert, listening to her breathing. In this crowd of sick people and exhausted families, I felt more alone than ever. The tests began. Each one required a new journey into the hospital's belly. Radiology with its big machines, ultrasound with its cold gel, blood draws in little rooms full of tubes. Each time we had to wait in endless corridors. We'd cross paths with lost gazes, hands clutching x-rays like treasures, snippets of worrying conversations. The diagnosis came in a small office from the mouth of a tired young doctor. He used difficult words: cyst, rupture, peritonitis. I only understood the grave tone of his voice and the speed with which he moved. She needed surgery immediately. We had to sign papers. These official papers had a terrible coldness, as if they were discussing something ordinary. But for me, signing meant giving permission to strangers to open my sister's body, to touch her life. My hand refused to hold the pen. The hours before the surgery were the longest of my life. They had finally given us a small private room. I watched my sister under an IV drip, her face already far away. When the orderlies came to get her, the sound of the wheels on the floor echoed in my head. I followed her to two large doors. On them, it said, Restricted access. The doors opened, took the stretcher, and closed. A great silence fell. I stayed there, pressed against the cold wall. Surgeons in green passed by, sometimes talking about simple things which seemed crazy to me. Other families waited, silent or exchanging worn-out words of comfort. Time stopped. Every minute was a mountain. In my head, I replayed everything I had done wrong, everything I should have done differently. When a man in blue came out, lowered his mask, and said the surgery had gone well, my legs gave way. The relief was so strong it made me dizzy. But that was just the beginning, they said. We had to monitor her, avoid infection. They brought her back to the room asleep, very pale, connected to tubes and blinking machines. The fight continued, but it was different. It was in that room, the first night after the surgery, that the world changed. I was exhausted. I had fallen asleep, my head against the bed. A change in the air woke me, not a sound, a presence. He was there. Standing on the other side of the bed, he was looking at the IV drip with total attention. His coat was blue, but a faded blue, almost gray. A small cloth cap covered his hair. He didn't seem to have arrived. He seemed to have always been there. He moved with precise gestures, wasting no time. He checked the bandage without touching the skin, as if he could see through it. He listened to her breathing simply by tilting his head. Then he turned to me. His face was pale, his features sharp. His eyes, they didn't have the fatigue of the doctors I had seen. They shone with a cold, calm intelligence, as if every illness was an interesting problem to solve. There was no emotion in him, only perfect concentration on my sister. "The heart is beating too fast for the medication she's on," he said in a flat voice that seemed to come from far away. "The painkiller in this bag will be ineffective after 2:15. Use that one." His long finger pointed to a vial on the table. 40 milliliters of water, warm, not cold. The stomach is fragile. And this, he pointed to an unlabeled ampule, is a vasoconstrictor residue. It must absolutely not enter her body. A mistake would be fatal in her condition. His instructions weren't suggestions. They were like laws. He took out a worn leather notebook, wrote a few words in tight handwriting with blue ink, and placed a sheet near the medicines. There was a name I didn't know, and an old-fashioned signature. Then he did something I will never forget. He passed his hand above my sister's forehead, without touching her, as if to dispel an invisible fever. Then he walked toward the door. He didn't touch the handle. He approached the wall, where the shadow of the door was darkest, and he seemed to blend into it, disappear into the paint. The door, which I had locked, hadn't moved. I stayed without breathing, my heart pounding loudly. My reason told me, "You're dreaming. You're too tired." But my senses said otherwise. I remembered the texture of his coat. I smelled a slight scent of lavender and medical product in the air. The paper of the prescription was real under my fingers. And then there was the time. It was midnight. At exactly 2:15, the monitor screen showed my sister's heart beating too fast. She began to stir in her sleep, to moan. I followed his instructions. I gave her the medicine he had indicated. In less than 10 minutes, her heart calmed down. She relaxed and fell into a deep sleep. That precision couldn't be a coincidence. The next night, I kept watch. I didn't sleep. I watched the corner of the room near the door. I waited, filled with a strange anxiety. What was I waiting for? A ghost? An angel? A product of my imagination? Yet I knew. He returned, at the same silent hour. He performed the same checks, but this time he adjusted the flow of an IV drip with a small wheel, with a sure gesture. He checked the scar and secured the bandage with a kind of tape I'd never seen. He placed a new prescription, slightly changing the doses, adding a different antibiotic. Then he looked in my direction. In his eyes there was no sympathy, no recognition. I was like a piece of furniture, a useful element of the room. He gave a tiny nod, and then again he turned away and was no longer there. He didn't leave through the door. He simply ceased to be there. The following days, the hospital lived on two modes. During the day, it was the world of the visible, of noise, of organization. The visits of doctors in white with their students, the courageous and overwhelmed nurses, the cleaners mopping the floors, families bringing food. The machine ran with its problems and its moments of kindness. But the night, the hospital transformed. The empty corridors seemed immense, lit by a dim light. The usual noises were replaced by the hum of fans, the regular beep of monitors, the soft steps of the night guards. It was a different territory, where sleeping, vulnerable patients created a fragile atmosphere. And in this nighttime world, he made his rounds. I wasn't the only one who knew. One night, an old nurse spoke to me. She told me he was a legend among the old-timers. They called him the Watcher, or the Blue Doctor. No one had ever seen him during the day. He appeared only in very serious cases, when a patient was between life and death. He never spoke to the staff. He acted, left notes that were found in the morning, notes that were always right. Some were afraid of him. Others respected him like a saint. The hospital administration said these were just stories, effects of fatigue. The moment of truth came with the visit of the head doctor, the professor, an important man, respected and feared. When he came to our room with his team, he examined my sister, looked at her file, said she was getting better. I gathered my courage and handed him the prescriptions signed by the Blue Doctor. I asked him if this night doctor was part of his team. His face completely changed. The important man vanished. He took the papers with great gentleness, as if they were very fragile. He recognized the handwriting even before reading the name. "My God," he murmured. He asked his team to continue without him, and he stayed with me. "This," he said, showing the prescriptions, "is the handwriting of Dr. R. He was my teacher, my master. He created this department almost 50 years ago. He was a genius. He had incredible intuition, total integrity. He practically lived here. He said a hospital never sleeps, and a doctor should never quite sleep either." His voice trembled a little. He died of exhaustion one very busy evening, in his office, his head on his desk. Since then, stories have circulated. The old nurses, those who knew him, say he never really left, that his concern for patients was so strong it left a mark, a habit. He looked me straight in the eyes. "These prescriptions, they are real. The changes he made are perfect. It's definitely him. If you say you saw him, then he is still watching, over his department, over the cases that would interest him. Your sister received a consultation of an exceptional nature." His words didn't explain the mystery, they made it more real, heavier. This wasn't a lost spirit, it was the continuation of a will to heal, pushed to its extreme. It was the very essence of medical work, without fatigue, without ego, without paperwork problems. His blue coat was the uniform of this eternal vocation. Our stay at the hospital ended. My sister's recovery was, according to all the doctors, quick and problem-free, almost miraculous. On the day of our departure, walking down the long corridor toward the exit, I passed the door of an old office, now used for storage. I stopped. I didn't open the door. I just placed my hand on the worn wood. I don't know what I hoped to feel. A trace. An echo. I only felt the cold of the wood and heard the distant sounds of the hospital continuing. Outside, the city assaulted us again, with its noise and smells. But something in me was different. I no longer saw the hospital as a fortress of cold science. I now knew that within its walls, alongside the medicine of the living, there existed another medicine. A silent and very ancient medicine, practiced by a blue shadow who refused to leave his post. He no longer belonged to the world of the living, but he had not forgotten his promise to heal. He walked the corridors at night, reading pain on sleeping faces, adjusting an IV drip, signaling a danger, watching. Perhaps every major hospital has its watcher. A surgeon, a nurse, an intern whose dedication was so total they became part of the soul of the place. They don't haunt, they protect. They are not ghosts of fear, but guardians of promises. At night, when the lights dim and the machines talk to themselves, they make their rounds, eternal interns, ensuring care that transcends even the greatest of boundaries. And for those who, like us, have crossed their path in a moment of great distress, it changes everything. You no longer look at a hospital in the same way. You know that behind every door, there isn't just illness. There is sometimes, very discreetly, the tenacious presence of a caregiver who loved his work so much, he decided never, ever to truly leave.